All right, my name is Brian Silver. I graduated from St. John's in 1999, which you may recognize as the last century. So I'm apparently significantly older than the rest of the panel, so hopefully I don't bore you with stories of antiquated technology and things like that. I graduated from St. John's with a BA in English after perusing some other potential majors, political science, which at that time I think they just called government here, as well as communications. Are you guys all seniors, juniors, sophomores? Smattering a bit. Is anyone here an English major? Way to go. I did what most English majors will do immediately after graduating, which is to say I went and got a job at Cheapo in St. Paul selling used CDs, much to my parents' chagrin, and then went and got a real job working for a financial services institution, which, needless to say, did not really fit what I was looking for in life. From there, I spent the next 6 years working at WCCO Radio in Minneapolis, which at the time was the radio home of the Minnesota Twins. Is anyone here thinking about radio? Kind of? Okay. We can talk about that later, but I spent 6 years working there. It was definitely a unique experience, not one that will make you rich. So be forewarned. And from there, I have to say I really did not, I got tired of working for a large media company. It was CBS Radio, it was Viacom, it was Infinity, and then it was CBS Radio again, and all the while I was a number. From there, I decided that what I wanted to do was work for nonprofits. I went to work at the Minnesota Museum of American Art in St. Paul, which sadly is no longer a bricks and mortar museum, but they are working on that. It was an unfortunate time in that the Walker, Minneapolis Institute of Arts, and the Wiseman were all going through major capital campaigns. And as big as the Twin Cities are, they were all sort of trying to pull money from the same pot. So needless to say, that didn't last long. The museum closed, and I found myself working at the Minnesota Humanities Center in St. Paul. Has anyone heard of the Minnesota Humanities Center? Okay. When I tell people that, the first thing they usually ask me is, "You must really love animals." That is the Humane Society, and they are very fine people, I'm sure, but that is not where I work. So I started there, it'll be 5 years in about a month, actually the day after St. Patrick's Day. As an Irish person, it's very easy to remember if your starting date is March 18th. It's usually a fairly rough day. I started there working on programs, primarily for K-12 educators, mostly in the state of Minnesota, but we also did do national campaigns. The Humanities Center, every state has a humanities center, council, organization, whatever they call it. They're all state, basically state hubs for the National Endowment for the Humanities. When I started there, we were focused primarily on K-12 education and creating content for them to use in their classrooms. So more content than pedagogy. I spent 2 weeks up on the Iron Range with 80 teachers from 33 different states, shepherding them around, which was a very interesting, unique experience. Many of these teachers, especially those who had come from out of state, had either never been to Minnesota before, or if they had certainly not been to the Iron Range. So it was a unique experience to get with, to work with all those teachers. Organizationally, we've gone through some changes over the last about 3 years. Our former president and CEO took a job with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. And at that time, as we brought on a new president, we decided to sort of change the scope of what we were doing to no longer focus strictly on K-12 educators, but to make it more of a community-wide organization. We still do a lot of stuff with K-12 education, but we also do more to work with communities throughout the state. So it's not limited to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the surrounding suburbs. And we focus on the changing demographics of Minnesota, I think, is fairly apparent. And a lot of, the old sort of notion of what it means to be Minnesotan is no longer necessarily 100% applicable. And so you can't just talk about the Germans and the Irish and the Scandinavians anymore. There's a growing Latino community, a growing Asian Pacific Islander community, growing African-American communities, and a lot of those people don't have an opportunity to have their stories told, whether that's in the community, whether that's in the classroom. And so at the Humanities Center, we focus on trying to sort of amplify those stories, not just for those specific ethnic or racial groups, but for all Minnesotans, so that we can all better understand each other. And in the K-12 world, when I was growing up, Minnesota was known for public education. We had some of the best public education in the United States. And we still have a reasonably good public education system. Sadly, however, Minnesota has one of the worst achievement gaps in the nation. And it's not that whether they're recent immigrants or they belong to a minority group, that they can't succeed in school. It's that we're not teaching to them. We teach by the old standard. Authors are dead white guys. History is about the colonization of the United States from Europe, with some passing mentions to slavery, to the civil rights movement. But there's a lot of things that are missing from these, from the education system. And so if you are African American, if you're an Asian American, if you're American Indian, and all you hear about is history or literature or any other subject from a Eurocentric, white-only sort of perspective, students are going to, they're going to tune out. And if they tune out in one area of school, they're going to tune out in the rest of the areas. And so what we try to do is not to focus, the achievement gap is a misnomer. It exists, but that's not the best way to describe it. There's lack of engagement. And so what we try to do at the Minnesota Humanities Center is to get everyone more involved, to be more engaged. Because if you can get, a young kid excited at school because they hear a story that is more reflective of their cultural background, their religious background, they see themselves in these stories, they become more engaged. They start to believe that this is an education for them. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent here because I manage the website and I do IT work and AV. And I think part of my sort of rambling here is that at a nonprofit, if anyone is interested in nonprofit work, you're going to wear a lot of hats. I do manage the website. I update the content. I proofread, everything that's submitted to me. But there's many, many, many other things that you do in your normal day. So that's, let's go to my typical work day. There isn't a typical work day in nonprofits. I spent this afternoon at the Capitol, which was somehow boring and exciting at the same time. The Minnesota Barber Board was there testifying before we were. The Amateur Sports Board, you know, we're all fighting for money. And part of communications is knowing your audience. A group of college students, you can get away with rambling a little bit. At the Capitol, they want to hear how you're spending money and why you think it is that you need more money. And I guess I would say that the strength of a liberal arts background is that it provides you with 4 solid years of critical thinking. You know, of being able to see beyond your own nose, to realize the lens with which you view the world. And unless you're talking to someone with the exact same background as you, in every sense, communication is going to be very tough. You have to know, what does your audience care about? What outcomes are they looking for? Is emotional testimony going to work better than fact-based? And I think that, you know, if I recall correctly, I think it was 40 credits to graduate with a BA in English. I think I ended up with about 74 by the time I left. So, you know, you read a bunch of stories and you sort of think to yourself, well, I'm not going into teaching. What use is this to me to have to read Madame Bovary? Why should I have to take post-colonial lit? Why, if I'm an English major, should I have to take astronomy? Those are reasonable questions, I think. But the idea of a liberal arts background is that you create a more rounded, whole human being, that you're able to understand where someone with a different viewpoint is coming from. And you may not agree with it. I know I often don't. But if you can at least see where that person is coming from, why do they think this when I think this? It allows for a greater ability for us to disagree without being disagreeable, to communicate wisely instead of irrationally. And the most irrational thing to possibly say is that human beings are rational. We can be, but we're often not. And so when you look at your liberal arts background, maybe you're in the communications department, maybe you're in the English department, Father Don. But there is so much more that you can do. I had no background in IT, in web design, in graphic design when I left here. But the liberal arts education makes you more comfortable to sort of take those leaps and say that, you know what, I don't have a background in this, but I will try this. I will use what I've learned in something completely different to try to make myself better at what it is I'm trying to learn. Does that make any sense? You sure? The pros and the challenges that come with your position. Communications is tough to describe. You know, we all communicate with people on a daily basis. And in your professional life, no matter what you choose, you're going to have to communicate with someone. You know, there's internal communications within your organization, within the company, with whatever you do, that allows you to throw out jargon and acronyms and things that will fly because everyone there is speaking a common language. But you have to understand that everyone is coming from a different place when you're trying to share what it is you do. what it is your organization is working for, how you're going to sell your goals to someone who controls the purse strings at the Capitol or the foundation, private donors. And I think that, you know, coming from St. John's, it's, you know, I don't want to say it's a homogeneous campus, because obviously it's not. But I think that there, you know, is the ability to share different ideas. I know that upstairs right now, and I want to thank you all for, one, not going out on Fat Tuesday, skipping the presidential debate, which is starting in like 40 minutes, or a lively conversation that is supposedly going on upstairs. No, I don't. I think they're going to lock the doors. You know, there's opportunities for growth after college, whether or not you go and get a master's or a PhD or anything like that. There's always opportunities to learn. And I think that's the one thing that I really took away from my time here, is you're always learning, even if you're outside the academic sort of environment. My commute kind of sucks, too, so that's one of the cons. I think I went over my 10 minutes.
Hi, my name's Jolene. Can you hear me okay? I currently work at the University of Minnesota College of Design. I graduated in 2009 with an English major, so thanks English majors and everyone else for showing up tonight. While I was here, I was in pseudonym, and I was doing poetry slams, and I was on a bunch of different clubs, and I was an English major who mostly just wanted to write poetry, so I never really picked a minor. I tried economics and environmental studies and art history, and I never settled down on just one, because I knew that I loved to write, and I knew that I was a really good communicator. And my English major, it helped me think, it helped me learn, it helped me be a better writer. When I left, I knew, when I graduated, I knew that I would have a little bit of time in between college and the rest of everything to play around. So I took a bike trip after I graduated because I wanted to hear people's stories. So I biked from Minneapolis to Washington, D.C. I took the summer to go out and to travel and to see what was kind of going on. The fall after I graduated, I went to India for 3 months to teach. At the time, there was a partnership with the school, and so I was able to go to a school and teach and volunteer, which was great. And then I came home, and I knew that I wanted something that was a little bit more of a schedule. I wanted an apartment. I wanted to live in the city. I wanted to make a little bit of money. And so I was fortunate enough to find an internship with Grey Wolf Press, which is a really great organization, and I know that they're pretty involved on campus with certain classes. I think Cindy Malone does a publishing class. And so that's a really great opportunity afterwards if you're looking for or interested in publishing. I applied as an editorial assistant because I thought, well, I'm an English major and I love to write, so I should be an editor. Not knowing at the time that editors have to think very systematically, and they have to know how to spell, and they have to know certain things that, being a more creative type, I was actually a better marketer. And I didn't know at the time, well, I should go back. When I applied for the Grey Wolf internship, they didn't give me the editorial one. They gave me the marketing internship. I was like, ugh, marketing. I don't want to sell stuff. But then I went in there, and I was working on their website, and I was writing press releases, and I was working with their publicist, and I was learning about how they were pitching stories to the media, and it was fascinating. And I realized that all of the things that I had been doing while I was at St. Ben's, marketing for clubs, doing email blasts for different events, even just putting on events, it was all marketing. And so you coming to this and having an interest in communications, by having the ability to be a creative person, to know how to speak clearly, all these things that come with being a communicator. For me, I ended up taking a kind of roundabout way of becoming an e-communications marketer, which is, I didn't even know what that was when I was in school, and that's fine. while I was at Grey Wolf, I was working in a coffee shop and I was working at Target, and I was desperate to make a little bit of money because those can pay for a little bit, but it's kind of hard. And so I went on Craigslist and I started just throwing out my resume to everything, including a bookkeeping job. I've never taken an accounting class in my life. I was like, they must want to hire me. I'll apply to them. And the woman wrote back to me and she said, I know you're not qualified for this, but I'm looking for a part-time marketing assistant to work from home and help me with my small business. Would you be interested? I was like, yeah. And so I met her, and we got to know each other a little bit. And it turned out that she had been a stripper for 10 years, who had then gone into real estate, who had then turned into a professional business coach, who had a business called The Daily Whip. And it was really hard for me at the time to go from taking classes with Sister Mara and all these people writing these very deep academic classes to start writing copy for The Daily Whip. But it was great. And during one of our first meetings, we got together, we were talking about my assignment, and she goes, okay, now write me up an invoice. I'm like, oh my God, what's an invoice? What does an invoice look like? How do you do an invoice? So I went home and Googled it. And put together an invoice, and that launched my freelance career, which for any of you, when you get done, you are 100% qualified to freelance, and it will take you places, and you will meet people, and you will be amazed at what you know and are capable of that a lot of people out in the world don't. When people realize that you know how to communicate the message, they'll be like, oh, great, can you help me with X, Y, Z? So my work with Erica, the business coach, transferred me also working with a matchmaking company in Minneapolis that was matching very wealthy singles with other very wealthy singles, which was not in my income bracket, but I was their Twitter person. I was like, great, I'll write tweets about dating, and they paid me for that. And then that led to meeting someone who was a gourmet chocolate bar company in Texas, and they needed me to write copy for their website, and they paid me in chocolate, which was excellent. And it was a really great experience. So if anyone is interested in freelance and wants to talk about it afterwards, we can kind of chat. After about 1.5 years of that, it's hard to sell yourself all the time, and I kind of wanted something that was a little bit more stable. And so I put my resume on careerbuilder.com, and within a day, a temp agency got back to me, and the University of Minnesota Press was looking for an interim publicist. And within a day, I was taking the place of their regular publicist who was on maternity leave, and I got to play with authors for 6 months, and it was awesome. I was working with the authors who are on their front list of their fall catalog, and I was helping them set up radio stuff and TV and putting on events and just faking it the whole time. They're like, can you do this? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, sure. And I would figure it out. And that then ended in November of 2011. And I applied for the current job where I'm at the College of Design. In my current position, I'm responsible for all of the content on our blog, social media, a biannual magazine that goes out to 17,000 alumni, which is really, really fun. I get to call myself an editor, even though I also have to wear a lot of other hats. And I also get to be a PR and a publicist person. And it all falls under the category of marketing still. I'm in the communications department, but I'm a writer, and I get to write. And I couldn't have planned this position if I hadn't kind of said yes to a couple other positions, and if I hadn't started out as an English major who was like, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do. Yeah, I know people say English majors don't make a lot of money, and or whatever, you're going to go teach, and I just hated that when people would say that, because I'm like, well, I love it, so I made it work, and I'm excited to hear some of your questions, because it's been a really good experience, so thanks.
I think we're good. All right, can you hear me? All right. My name's Hemmelgarn. I graduated from St. John's last May, so I haven't been out too long. I was a communication major. I was a management major for the first year and a half until I took Katie Johnson's intro comm class. Maybe you've taken that. That kind of got me hooked. Switched to comm my sophomore year and graduated last year. I work as a freelance photographer right now, as well as a team photographer for the Minnesota Twins. When I was in high school, current football coach now, Gary Foshing, his wife was an assistant principal at my high school, and I was big into graphic design and designing sports stuff, and he got me hooked up here with an internship, so that's the reason why I came to St. John's. From there, I helped design all the football programs, basketball programs, all the sports stuff, and happened so that in our office we had photography equipment. Started using that fall of my freshman year, kind of got hooked with it, kept growing from there, started to meet people, send out emails, ask if I could try shooting for different teams and stuff. I got in with St. Cloud State, shot an email to the University of Minnesota athletic photographer. The year the Gophers opened the brand new TCF football stadium, and his niece actually went to St. Ben's, and we had comm classes together, so that worked out perfect because he let me come help out with the U of M and started to meet people there, and from there my business grew. I was hired by the Minnesota Twins the spring of my junior year. Worked it out with the baseball coach here. I was able to work with the Twins and play baseball. Entering year 3 in a couple weeks. In August of last season, my boss, who was in charge of us photographers, decided to leave, and I kind of picked up her slack and worked 40 hours a week with the Twins, and I started to help out in the communication aspect. So not only did I take pictures, I started to edit all of them and archive them in the Twins archives. Started to work in graphic design. I designed media guide covers for us, helped to write statistical information for our media guide, work with players and stuff. Besides working with the Twins, I work as a freelancer. I work for USA Today Sports Images. I cover Timberwolves, Wild, every sports team in the area, you name it, I cover them. So my typical workday is not normal, I guess. I get up, have breakfast, maybe play some video games, hang out for a while. Most of the time when I work, it's at night, a lot of weekends. Anytime there's a sporting event, I guess I'm there. Hockey kind of sucked this year because they had the lockout. They were gone for a couple months, so that's my main thing in the winter, so I was a little out of luck, a lot more sitting around than I would have liked. Baseball season starts in a couple weeks. You got 81 games, so it's a pretty full season. Some pros and challenges, I guess. Definitely with the Twins, I'd say a pro is being a photographer. I work with every department. I work under the communication department. That's where my office is. But I report to if like marketing needs pictures or something before a game, or anybody, I guess, community. I go out and do community events with players. I work with a lot of different people, which is helpful because I've met a lot of people. A lot of different people have been recommending me for different jobs around the area, so that's been beneficial. I'd say that's the big key. If you notice, that's the only way I've worked my way up is meeting people. It's definitely a huge thing. Don't be afraid to talk to people or introduce yourself. And like I said, I probably wouldn't be here right now if I never sent that email to the U of M guy who had a niece that went to St. Ben's. I mean, networking is huge. I would definitely highly recommend that. So you.
So I'm Ellen Hunter Gans. I graduated in 2005 and I broke my microphone, so I don't know if you guys can hear me. Can you okay? Okay. That's all right. So I started out as a communications major, loved it, and when I studied abroad in London, I was reading a book in Hyde Park and had this flash that I wanted to be an English double major too, and like wandered into traffic to go back to, this was back in the day when they had computer labs, to send an email asking if I could add an English major, and I did, and in spite of that double major, I took a soul-sucking corporate job right out of undergrad, Target, sorry, it was awful, and stuck around there for a couple of years, and it's a great organization. It was just that it wasn't suited to my skill set, which was really, my first love is writing, but I never thought that I could make a job out of it, so I assumed I couldn't, and I took all kinds of PR internships, and they were okay, but I was still clock watching and hoping it would be 5 so I could go home. And so I thought, well, since I don't know what I want to do, I'll take this. But then I applied to grad school to a program I did not think I would get into, and did, and moved to London. So I spent a couple years over there. I got a master's of science from the London School of Economics in kind of business and media, and then they are affiliated with another program. So then I moved to Los Angeles after that and got a Master of Arts at USC. Go Trojans. So when I started grad school, people coming out of that program were getting hired as just ridiculous jobs, like Disney's next chief marketing officer. But the economy crashed about 3 weeks after I started school. I was actually in Africa backpacking around at the time, and I got back, and everyone was like, JK, none of us are going to have jobs. So when I finished, it was true. We were all fighting for these entry-level jobs that we probably would have turned down coming out of undergrad. And so it was one of those situations where you'd apply for a job and find out that 1,000 other people had applied for it, literally 1,000, and it was a crap job anyway. So I started freelancing just to kind of keep from going crazy and to fill the time. And after about 6 or 7 months, I got offered a real job, and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a freelance graphic designer in Chicago, and she said, well, why don't you just keep doing what you're doing? And I said, well, because it's not a job. I need a job. And she said, how isn't it a job? How many hours a week are you working? And I said, well, about 40, sometimes 60. She said, well, why don't you call it a job? And she made me business cards and a website, and I made a name and decided to call it a job. And that was, so that was officially 3 years ago, but I was freelancing for a little while before that. So I kind of wound up here by accident, but I can honestly say that I love it. So writing is a lot of what I do, but I also, because of my academic background, do a lot of communication strategy. I'm on retainer at a couple places where I basically function as director of marketing, so I'll kind of create infrastructure for strategic marketing plans, and then I'm able to fill it in with content. But really, I'm just a contractor all these places. The things I love about it are the flexibility. There's something different every day. Being my own boss is sweet. I usually roll out of bed around 11, go for a run, check emails, hop on a conference call, and then I also work late at night. I mean, it's not uncommon for me to work until 4 or 5 or 6 in the morning. My clients all think that I'm really, really busy between the hours of 8 and 11, and that's why I can never have meetings or conference calls, but really I'm asleep. So, yeah, and it's great. St. Ben's is actually one of my clients, and I just had an article published in Runner's World. I'm not a journalist, but I still like writing, so that's fun. And yeah, it's no day is the same, but I like that. It's also very scary to have it like that, especially as a freelancer, because I never know where my next paycheck's coming from, with the exception of the retainer clients, and even they could drop me anytime. So budgeting is always a challenge, because it's always well, if I keep this client, and if I get a new client, then this is going to be what's going to happen this year. So plus you have to wear a lot of hats. You have to be a salesperson, you have to be a bookkeeper, you have to be a marketer. It's very difficult to sell yourself, as you said, and it's awkward, frankly, but for me, the benefits far outweigh the drawbacks, and I don't see myself taking a real job anytime soon. So.
Are there any questions or any comments?
So you do freelance journaling?
Me?
I sort of just recently started writing like for crowdsourcing, basically. And I'm just curious, is that resume worthy at all, or is it just, I kind of use it
Sure. I would focus on the type of stuff that you're writing rather than emphasizing what it's through. Yeah, but, you know, I would say you're talking about it with somebody. I don't think you necessarily need to put the name of it on a resume, but just to say, you call yourself a freelance writer, why not? You know, and if people ask about the specifics of projects, talk about the subject material you were writing about. You don't have to say what it was. The main reason I say that is because that makes it sound like your work is available very cheaply, which is not something that you necessarily want to advertise. So.
And it's a good start to a portfolio, which is what you'll need and should have and should be working on, and just always updating it, especially since it sounds like you have some content. And that's a good way to start and kind of get your foot into the door to maybe something else.
God, you know, there's differences and there's not differences. It's, you know, when I worked at radio, I can't remember how many CBS radio stations there were across the country. You know, I'll just say 600 just for a number. I mean, I guess the biggest difference is that if you're working for a for-profit company, is that at the end of the day, what they care about is profit. That's not to critique them. I mean, that is what they're there for. That's how you get a paycheck. But I guess, you know, it comes down to, do you want to, what level of satisfaction are you looking for in your life? When I worked at radio, I did a lot of copywriting. You know, it was some unique experiences. I got to spend a lot of time hanging out with Twins players and, you know, just random sort of celebrities who were there for in-studio interviews, things like that, driving Don Shelby all over God's creation, which was a unique perk. But at the end of the day, yeah, I was writing, but, you know, I was writing public service announcements and copy for on-air contests and, you know, the Good Neighbor Award. You went home at the end of the day and you're like, what the hell did I just do all day? You know, what have I done to better society, better myself? What have I done to make myself happy? You know, when I came to St. John's and decided that I was going to be an English major, I was fairly convinced I was going to go into teaching. My father was an English teacher. Everyone else in my family was an English major. It seemed like a sort of a natural sort of progression. But then again, you know, you're between the ages of 18 and 22. How much do you really know? But I knew that, you know, I wanted to do something that I felt had some sort of meaning to it beyond just we made some extra money this quarter.
So my way of answering that question is I went to this panel when I was a senior, and there was a guy up there who had a corporate communications job, and I remember somebody asking him, he'd mentioned he loved writing, and somebody asked him, well, what kind of writing do you get to do? And he was so stoked because he was like, sometimes they let me put together the Friday Fun Facts. And I just about vomited because, you know, no offense if, God, I hope none of you do Friday Fun Facts, but, you know, it was just, and it was so, you know, it was just so depressing because, you know, here was this creative writer, and that was what got him excited. And I'm like, they've chipped away at your soul so much that that's exciting to you. So that's my answer.
And as far as a small nonprofit, when I was at Grey Wolf, you wear a lot of hats. And the culture is one of a very intimate community where you might only have 8 coworkers, but you know each other really well, and if you're functioning right, you're a really well-oiled machine. And I've seen examples of a couple nonprofits where you just want to get in the door because it looks like they're having so much fun hanging out with each other. But they're not, it's a salary, it always comes back to the salary. But at Grey Wolf, there were editors there that had been there for 20 years, and they loved what they were doing, and that was all that they needed. And at the U, it's not a corporation, but it's this weird in-between, where it's a very, very large academic institution. There's a lot of bureaucracy, but you learn, there's just different cultures everywhere, so, yeah.
This kind of goes back to the first question, but do you have any tips for putting together a portfolio? Like things you should definitely include or things you definitely shouldn't?
Save everything and then go from there. It's sad how many things that I've written in life that, you know, at the time you're proud of it, and then you put it in your desk somewhere, and then the next thing you know, you can't find it again, and you wish you always had it. It's easier to strip away from what you have than to try to quickly build something up so that you can do it.
Ideally, you'd have enough variety that you could have a different packet of work samples for whatever you are applying for. You know, I mean, I don't know how to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. And it might be hard at first to have that many samples.
Right.
So to start having an idea, I would say having all your stuff together, and then if you have a job or an internship interview, really thinking about what would they want to see, and being able to kind of pull from both of those would be a strategy that I've used in the past.
Definitely, I would say try to make your portfolio geared towards the business you're applying for. I mean, when I try to get clients of different sports teams, if it's a hockey team, I'm not going to send them a bunch of my favorite baseball pictures. You try to gear it towards them so they know what you can do towards that. I mean, but when I first started, it was you send them what you have, and it might not be that sport necessarily, but it's what you have for now, and then from there, you just keep building it, I guess.
And proofread.
Yes.
I have a question for you about USC and
Yeah.
about the graduate program.
Yeah.
What specific program did you go into, and I guess how do I put it? Like, what was it really worth going? I guess it's 2 years. Was it really worth it?
I went to I did global media and communications at the Annenberg School of Journalism and Communications. So whenever people ask me if they should go to graduate school, my first answer is always no. And it's not because I didn't love it. I had a great time. But first of all, the degrees are totally superfluous to what I'm doing now. I don't need them. They're conversation starters, but I absolutely did not need them. If you're in a career path where you know it will help you advance to have that degree, and you've already started down that path, then by all means go for it. But to go to grad school because you don't know what you want to do, especially to go full time, you're so much better off gaining experience during those couple of years. So I don't regret it because it didn't really hurt me because I love what I'm doing now. But I hate to see people go to grad school as a default. You know, I guess, yeah, that's kind of the answer.
Are any of you considering MFA programs? No. Fine arts, creative writing. I'm in the process of applying to my Master's of Fine Arts and waiting to hear back. And I felt like at the end of senior year, there was a lot of pressure to go right onto that right away for the creative writing track. And if anyone's considering it, it's definitely okay to take a couple of years and to get some work experience and to figure out yourself a little bit better and have that portfolio built up so that when you do go, you might be financially able to support it and you actually know that you want to do it. Because you leave and there's a lot that happens, and if you find yourself continually going back to it, I'd say that that's a pretty big sign that it's probably something that you should think about more seriously.
Also, I would have burned out if I'd gone right to grad school. I appreciated school a lot more when I'd have a break. And it is not undergrad repeated, believe me.
One more question. Okay, well, we'll just stop here. Let's give a round of